In recent years, social media influencers have become a prominent figure in the digital age, leveraging their online presence to promote brands, products, and services to their vast following. With millions of followers and lucrative endorsement deals, social media influencers have emerged as key players in the marketing industry. However, like any other business sector, the influencer industry is not immune to tax evasion. In Malaysia, the Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia (LHDN) has recently announced its intention to monitor social media influencers for possible tax evasion. Abang Ehsan emphasised that it is crucial for social media influencers and digital entrepreneurs to be transparent about their income and fulfill their tax obligations. Ms. Hanis, like many other influencers in Malaysia, found herself in a state of confusion and concern after learning about the new income tax regulations that will impact individuals earning more than RM3,000 a month from sponsored brand content, paid reviews or online business via social media. The scenario that Ms. Hanis found herself in is just one example of the challenges that individuals when it comes to managing their finances and understanding their tax obligations.
Next, we move on to the responsible of taxpayer. Generally, each taxable individual is required to declare all income to the Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia (IRBM) and responsible to register income tax number or update information. In Ms. Hani's scenario, she is responsible to register income tax number if she did not yet register. It is her duty to update the information regarding her online business, which she involved herself. Even freelancers and part-timers too are not exempted from registering their and filing their taxes. Then taxpayer is responsible in declaring annual income. Ms. Hanis need to declare the annual income because it is important to determine the income tax rate. Every individual who earns more than 34,000 ringgit, about 2,833 per month after EPF deduction, will need to register as a taxpayer with a tax fund. Lastly, pay income tax. Ms. Hanis need to pay her income tax to IRBM because she is subjected to the income tax. She need to pay the tax on time to avoid any penalty or charges. There are also other responsibility of taxpayer such as duty to keep sufficient business record, leave passage, medical and dental benefit, fees or honorarium for expert services, income remitted from outside Malaysia, death gratuity and gratuity paid to a contract officer.
Self-assessment system SAS has been shifted from Malaysian Inland Revenue MIRB to the taxpayer. In Malaysia, the taxpayer is responsible to compute one's own chargeable income and tax payable. In the terms of responsibility to keep document, in Section 82, it was stated that an individual carrying a business must maintain record in a safe custody for a period of 7 consecutive years. Then, for the submission of return, Puan Hanis can use physical borang nyata forms or internet filing system to submit her tax returns. Currently, an individual with work income has their employer deduct their tax on a monthly basis via the monthly tax deductible MD scheme. Alright, for return and assessment, subsequently Ms. Hanis is required to submit her income tax return to the Inland Revenue Board (IRB) within the prescribed time frame. Starting in year assessment 2008, taxpayer may submit a return permission to their tax agent to file their return electronically. In addition, Ms. Hanis may return to the DG for an YA. Therefore, the DG may accept an issue or he may reject it and use his best adjustment to determine the amount of tax due. In Section 143 subsection 2 would deem the notice of assessment to be valid through it may contain mistake where if Ms. Hanis discovers such an error, it would be advisable to give the mistake amended as soon as possible.
For amendment, in this case, Ms. Hanis is allowed to make self-assessment on information or assessment in the income tax return ITRF submitted to IRBM on time by submitting on amended return form ARF within 6 months from due date for submissions of ITRF to the Hasil Office. For return and assessment, Ms. Hanis is allowed to make amendments on previous returns submitted if there is any discovery of any error pertaining to. There are some errors related to which is income underreported or omitted from the computation of her income. Next, if there are any expenses wrongly and excessively claimed, the tax can be amended of return. Under penalties and offences, Ms. Hanis is allowed to make amendments by filing the amended tax return as stated under Section 103, Subsection 1A. Any tax payable or additional tax payable that arise from her amended return shall be due and payable on the date of the amended return.
Now let's continue with offences and penalties. Penalties will be divided between with prosecution and without prosecution. Firstly, failure to furnish a return for a year assessment. If a taxpayer fails to submit their income tax return for a year assessment without a reasonable excuse, they should aware that Section 112, Subsection 1 of the same Act provides for the consequence of failing to submit an income tax return in Malaysia, and such penalty will be imposed upon conviction. The penalty with prosecution under these offences will be between 200 and 20,000 ringgit Malaysia or imprisonment less than 6 months or both. Lastly, failure to give notice of chargeability to tax. A person who arrived in Malaysia during a particular assessment year and is either liable or not liable to taxation for that year but is subject to taxation for the year of assessment that follows that year and must notify the Director General of this within 2 months of arriving in Malaysia. The penalty for these offences will be fined between 200 ringgit Malaysia to 20,000 ringgit Malaysia or imprisonment up to 6 months or both. This will be assessed in the Section 112 Subsection 1. Penalty for these both offences without prosecution, it will be assessed in the Section 112 Subsection 3. First, the amount of the penalty that the Director General may impose on the individual will be triple the tax amount before any set-off, repayment or relief under this Act. Second, upon payment of this penalty, the individual will not be subject to charge for the same offences. Self-assessment regime requires taxpayers to compute their income tax payable in accordance with the tax laws and IRB practices. If there is a departure from IRB practices or High Court decision, a taxpayer must object against his own assessment and submit an appeal letter to the tax authorities at the time his return is submitted. This is because the return submitted is deemed a notice of assessment. The taxpayer has right to appeal under Section 99 against the following assessment. First, assessment or additional assessment or advanced assessment made because of desk audit or field audit findings, tax investigation, or second, best judgment assessment made when there is no submission of tax return or late submission of tax return. This is under Section 90 Subsection 3 and under Section 91 Subsection 1. Submission of Notice of Appeal, Form Q. A taxpayer is required to submit 4 copies of Form Q. It must contain, first, detailed grounds of appeal, reasons of disagreements. Second, issue to be trial. Third, date and amount of tax payable as stated in Notice of Assessment. Fourth, signature by taxpayer or authorised person, cannot be tax agent or lawyer. Late Appeal Procedure, Form N. When an appeal is not made within 30 days from the deemed date of assessment or service of notice of assessment, the taxpayer known as appellant may make a written application using Form N in 2 copies for an extension of time to lodge an appeal. This is under Section 100, Subsection 1.
To summarize from the problem she faced, it has been established that she must pay taxes even though she receives some income from her work as an influencer. According to the new income tax regulations, an individual must earn more than 3,000 per month from sponsored brand content, paid reviews or online business conduct through social media. Ms. Hanis is therefore not exempt from this rule. Then, when it comes to Ms. Hanis' tax obligation, it appears that she still lacks knowledge of things like filing income taxes and declaring annual income. She also needs to complete Form B, an individual form, in order to declare her income. She can use all of that information to amend any errors made on online tax submissions that need to be corrected. She can change any additional amount of chargeable income and pay income tax. She must submit her amendment at the same time as she submits her update tax return data to avoid any penalties.